I haven't said anything about it, but I have to tell you that it's been a long time since I've enjoyed anything so much as I have meeting with all of you here, and the youth and the freshness, and very, 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 very strengthening, very encouraging. I hope we do this again. And you'll have to do it soon, however, because I'm almost 80. And when I say youth and enthusiasm, that's every single one of you. I don't see Father Stephen. Is there any left? Yeah, I need to send him a message or something. He talked yesterday about the inability to think without a pencil in hand. I identify with that. I don't know how many thousands of notebooks I've filled over the years. I know that when I die, my wife's going to throw them all out. That's the we'll do it the way we did it yesterday. I'll make a few remarks. Then we'll rise to the reading of the gospel. Pardon me. And then I will give you a meditation on the gospel. Many years ago, when I got my first teaching job, I was 30 years old. I was hired at a little college called Bellarmine College. If you go there now, it's Bellarmine University. And there are scores of buildings all over this campus. Back when I taught there, it was just Bellarmine College, there were only 3 buildings. The rest of it really was campus. In fact, on the campus, we had an 18-hole golf course, which is long gone now. And I used to walk out in the mornings, leave my apartment, walk out early morning, walk around the campus. It sits out on Newburgh Road. The whole of Newburgh Road is a Catholic highway. The Carmelite nuns have a monastery there. The Passionist Fathers have a monastery there. St. Agnes Parish is there. Our Lady of Peace Mental Hospital is there. And right across from Bellarmine, which is on the east side, right across from Bellarmine, which is the second largest cemetery in Louisville. The largest is Cave Hill, where Muhammad Ali was buried yesterday. But the Roman Catholics had their own cemetery. The south of town was Calvary. But I'd walk out there, and occasionally I would meet a golfer out on the course. And one morning I'm walking across. There's a fellow bent over, about to make a putt. But just at that minute, a funeral cortege comes south on Newburgh Road. Probably 20, 30 cars. And they come down and they make their turn into Calvary Cemetery and disappear over a hill. And the fellow's making his putt, and then he looks up and he sees this funeral cortege. He puts down his putter, takes off his hat, places it over his heart, and he stands there at attention while the funeral cortege goes past. And when he did, he put his hat back on and continued with his putt. After he finished his putt, I walked up to him. I said, I was quite impressed by this. You don't see this sort of reverence anymore. He says, the least I could do, we were married for 35 years. Now that you're all in the proper frame of mind, I'll read you the brief gospel text of this morning from the 7th chapter of the Gospel of Luke. Now it came to pass the day after that Jesus went into a village called Nain. Many of his disciples went with him, and much people. Now when he had come nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and much people of the city was with her. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and said unto her, Stop weeping. And he came and touched the bier, and they that bare him stood still. And he said, Young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak. And he delivered him to his mother. There came a fear on all, and they glorified God, saying, A great prophet is risen among us, and God has visited his people. And this rumor of him went throughout all Judea, and throughout all the region round about. This is the gospel of the Lord. The only son of a widow has passed away in the village of Nain. The mourners form a procession to carry his corpse out to the burial grounds. These mourners, as they walk along, begin to speculate about the meaning of what they're doing. It occurs to the more philosophical among them to repent, to reflect. That is, life is, after all, a kind of a funeral procession. We're walking around the earth, we're walking toward our graves, and we can't walk anymore, somebody carries us there. But from the minute we begin to be formed in our mother's wombs, we are moving toward our tombs. And if we simply accepted that as a fact, many men would find the experience unbearable. Now, included among the mourners at Nain that day are individuals eager to discover the deeper meaning of what might render the experience more bearable. One of their number, a famous citizen of Nain, named Immanuel Kant, expresses his view that this procession is really about a rational process. He speculates that the human journey, this sustained funeral procession, regarded as a whole, should be seen as the realization of a hidden plan of nature to bring about a new political order in which all the potentials of humanity can develop in fullness. So this mournful procession is, in fact, a march forward. It's a progression. Among the village mourners, however, is another man who pays attention to the nature of the procession itself. It's not just straight progress. He sees that. It is erroneous, he believes, to imagine that all the force in the procession goes in only one way. His name is Hegel, another famous citizen of Nain. He is of the opinion that the procession goes forward through a dialectical process in which some of the steps necessarily go backwards. These backward steps, however, are a necessary part of the procession as a whole. It's not straight progress. It's a dialectical process. progress. All progress, he believes, inevitably spawns its own opposite. True progress occurs when the positive and the negative forces reach a compromise that includes elements of both of them. Some of the younger people in the procession, like Karl Marx, find this a rather attractive idea. Okay. Another is Hermann Hesse, who he was very popular when I first started teaching college back in Bellarmine in the 60s. Imagine that, teaching college in the 60s. You see that very idea if you look at the character of the Steppenwolf in Hermann Hesse. Another of the mourners of Nain, a man named Oswald Spengler, make the astute observation that this procession seems to be going around in circles. It makes progress, but not entirely, and the dialectic has to do with the other side of a circle. So he concludes that the procession follows a cyclical pattern. Okay. And he shared some of these views with another citizen man. Anyway, in due course, the procession heads toward the gateway of the village. Some of the mourners moving straight on and convinced of a positive outcome. Some of them hobbling along in a dialectical limp. Some of them simply walking around in circles. They all arrive, however, somehow at the gate of the village, where they find a massive traffic jam. About this, Luke is a bit more explicit. Another procession, it seems, is trying to come into the village. And both processions encounter one another at the gate, and there's no traffic light. So there's a jam up of two processions at the gate, because this other procession does not believe in progress and is going in the other direction. Luke tells us this morning that Jesus, arriving at the gate of Nain, is accompanied not only by his regular disciples, but also by a large crowd that follows him into the town. The gateway is narrow. So these companions endeavoring to enter completely fill it and create a problem for the people coming in the other direction. One side, it would seem, must give way to the other. Or is there a third option? Actually, there is. Jesus steps up to the funeral procession and does what is considered rather ill taste. He stops it. Luke conveys the action of Jesus in this scene through 5 verbs. Let's look at those 5 verbs. He sees the widow. Sees. He feels compassion for her. He speaks. He touches. And he presents the son to his mother. 5 verbs. Each of these is a human act, something done in the flesh. First, Luke tells us, the Lord saw her. It's the first time Jesus is called Lord in the Gospel of Luke. The Lord saw her. The Gospels testify rather frequently that Jesus really did see people. For example, last Sunday's gospel. Jesus sees the blind man. That's how we begin. Jesus sees the blind man. Individual persons are not blurry and indistinct to Jesus. He regards them closely, attentive to their circumstances and their needs. Early in the Gospel of John, Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him. When you were under the fig tree, I saw you. A few Sundays back, Jesus saw the paralytic lying in the pool of Bethesda. Several Sundays before that, Jesus saw the tears of the sisters at the grave of Lazarus. And then the following Friday, as he hung on the cross, Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing by. The scene at Nain is one of three in which the evangelist Luke speaks of Jesus seeing the special needs and circumstances of individual women. The Nain story is profitably compared with the account of Jesus healing the crippled daughter of Abraham in the synagogue, where, Luke tells us, he sees this woman, all bent over, his daughter of Abraham, 38 years. Near the end of his ministry, Luke says, Jesus looked up and saw the rich men putting their gifts into the treasury. And he also saw a certain widow putting in 2 mites. Jesus' habit of personal observation and assessment, his imaginative, sympathetic perception of individual needs, is regarded and portrayed in the Gospels as the impetus of many blessings. The first thing is to be seen by Jesus. Second, says Luke, he had compassion on her. The root of this action in this scene is Jesus' spontaneous gaze of sympathy. Not often does the New Testament identify Jesus' inner emotions. But this is one of the places where it happens. Recognizing the dead man's mother as a widow with no other children, and thus no further means of support, Jesus seizes the hour. Moreover, his compassion here is modified by a significant detail. The dead son is a monogenes, an only child. This detail is a feature quite distinctive to Luke. The other Gospels never use the expression to describe a beneficiary of Jesus' blessings. In Luke, however, this action at Nain is the first of 3 miracles that Jesus works on behalf, the benefit of parents of an only child. Luke identifies the daughter of Jairus as an only child. Mark does not. Nor Matthew. The epileptic son in chapter 9 of Luke, remember, comes down from the mountain of Transfiguration, described as an only child, a monogenes. This Lucan attention points to a particular social aspect of Jesus' compassion. His enhanced sympathy for parents who would lose an only child. Third, Jesus speaks first to the mother and then to her dead son, To each, he speaks with authority. Present imperative, stop weeping. Weep no more. Not don't weep, that would be the aorist. Present imperative, stop weeping. And then to the young man, rise up, I tell you. In all three gospel accounts of Jesus raising someone from the dead, he does so by speaking directly to the dead person. In addition to the present story, there's the instance of Jairus' daughter. Talitha cum, darling, arise. And then Jesus' friend at Bethany, Lazarus, come forth. In all three places, the voice of Christ is the instrument of resurrection. Amen, I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. Fourth verb. Jesus came and touched the bier, the open coffin, at which point the pallbearers stood still. Remember the picture we had of Jesus yesterday in Peter's boat? Puts his hand out, calms the sea. Here he comes, steps up with authority, and he touches the bier. Everybody stops. Here we have more than a traffic jam at a village gateway. This funeral march, this procession to the cemetery, goes no further. It is over. The funeral has been called off. He who lives and believes in me shall never die. Luke takes special care here to portray the living Jesus as triumphant over death. It is significant that he refers to Jesus in this story as Ho Kyrios, the Lord. First time in Luke's gospel, the Lord. It's in the context of death and life. Ho Kyrios, title by which the early Christians normally designated the risen Messiah, victorious over death and over the grave. Therefore, let all the house of Israel know most assuredly that God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Christ. Although the Bethlehem angels had called Jesus the Lord Messiah, the scene is the first time Luke uses his narrator's voice to refer to Jesus by this important title. From this point on in his gospel, Luke speaks frequently as Jesus as Ho Kyrios. From that point on, from the point with the raising of the son of the widow of Nain. So the victory over death at Nain is the turning point in Luke's narrative. From here on in Luke's account, Jesus is the Lord. Fifth, referring to the dead son, Luke says that Jesus presented him to his mother. This clause repeats word for word the Septuagint text of 3 Kingdoms, chapter 17, verse 23, word for word. For the prophet Elijah raises up the monogenes, the only son of the widow Zarephath. The witnesses of this miracle perhaps thought of that earlier story about a prophet, because they end today's account by exclaiming, "A great prophet is risen among us." Amen.